So by this far we discussed about actually three cases of a free fall motion. The first case is where the object is moving upwards only, and the other case is where the object is moving downwards. And we'll look at the third case where the object has been thrown straight upwards from the ground, and after a time the object has got landed to the ground as well. So that's said to be a ground back to ground case actually of the free fall motion. Now we'd like to look at, but just have to make sure that you have gone through all those lessons, because it is the same concept that we should have to use in the analysis of the case that we have to discuss in this video. So just have to pay attention. Now let's say we have the object. Let's say this is the height of a building. Can be any building or whichever, but it is a structure with a somewhat height. And let's say this is the ground level, so should be this. And assuming that we have an object that has been thrown straight upwards, and from up the a building, there should be this. And after time, the object has got landed into the ground in this way. So now, what is the initial velocity of the object? So the initial velocity is given as actually being given as u. So now let's say the building is of a height given as, let's say, h. This is the height of the building. And what is the final velocity of the object as it strikes the ground? So now we'll have it as this. So this is the final velocity given as v. Let me just have to have it in this way. This is the arrowhead showing that the object is falling down. So this is the final velocity of the object as it strikes the ground. And the point in which the object decides to come back or decides to turn back to the ground, as we already discussed, this one is said to be a maximum point given as mp. And the velocity at the maximum point is given as actually vmax. And usually it is given 0. It is given as 0 unless otherwise, but it is given as 0. That's the velocity at the maximum point. That much we discussed already. So now, what is the time it takes for the object from the top of the building to the highest point or the highest position? So as we already discussed, this one is said to be Tmax. So the time itself is said to be the Tmax. That's the time it takes for the object to move from the top of the building to the highest position. Much as you can see this one, you should have to know that if I were to extrapolate this one, you see that the case we have here is said to be ground back to ground case. The one we recently discussed about, try to go through that video, you come across this one. So that is. So which means the time it takes for the object to move from the top of the building to the highest position is said to be Tmax. And it has to be calculated using the same way we actually discussed about it. And what is the actually distance or the height from the top of the building to the highest position? Now that actually a distance, it is this one. Now this is said to be a maximum. This should be a maximum height. So now, which means the distance of the object from the top of the building and to the maximum point is said to be the maximum height, which is given as this one. But what is the overall height of the object from the level ground to the maximum point? Now it is given as this. Now we have this as h. So now, which means actually let me just have to use in this way for you to properly get it. Let's say the distance from here to this point should not be symbolized as h, but let's say it should give actually should be given as, let's say, a. And let's say the height of the building should be given as, let's say, b, in terms of actually not that of h. Let's say this is the b. So what is the overall maximum height of the object? So now the maximum height, which is given as h max, will be given as a plus b, where a is the height from the actually top of the building to the maximum point, and where b is the height of the building. So take note of that. So which means the maximum height will be given as height a plus the height b. So take note of that. So now let's start with the analysis of this case of the free fall motion, and for you to easily understand the context here. So now first thing, what is the Tmax, or what is the actually Tmax of the object? So that's the time from the top of the building to the maximum point. So now Tmax will be calculated using the same way we discussed it before on the way up motion of a free fall, where now the time takes for the object to move from the top of the building to the maximum point. So that's the Tmax. So how should we be able to calculate the Tmax if this is the case? So now we use, first of all, this equation. Velocity, this is the final velocity, is equal to AD plus U. Now since this is the free fall motion, this final velocity is the velocity at the maximum point. So now we'll have it as a Vmax. Mind you, why we are saying that this is the final velocity at the maximum point, because we are interested to look at the time takes from here up to this point. So which means that's the final destination of our analysis. So this is given as Vmax, which is equal to negative g. Now this is Tmax, and plus U. So this is the formula that we can use to have the Tmax in this way. So which means we'll have it as negative g Tmax is given as, that should be Vmax minus U. In this case we'll have it as Tmax being given as Vmax minus U divided by negative g. So that's the analysis you have to understand. So now which means even the initial velocity can also be obtained using the same formula if we have the Tmax. So if we have the Tmax, even the initial velocity can also be obtained using the same formula, in the sense that we can have it as this. So which means if we have the Tmax, initial velocity can also be obtained in the same way, where I just have to make U as the subject formula. Of course, usually Vmax is given as L. So bear that, unless otherwise, but basically it is given as L. But although the velocity at the maximum point is given as L, acceleration is no longer L. That's the only point where you expect a velocity to be L but acceleration to be non-L. That's the only point in our free fall motion. So that is how else we can be able to have the how can you be able to have, let's say, the maximum height? Let's say should be now at this height, that is from the top of the building to the maximum point, or the maximum position. So how can you be able to get that up to? Of course, it is the same context that we discussed before on actually way up the free fall motion, where the object is moving upwards only. So we can have to take the same concept. So how should we be able to have actually this height? So now that height will be actually calculated as, now we discussed that it has to be given as a v square is equal to u square plus 2as, where this is the acceleration, this is the displacement, initial velocity, this is the final velocity. So that what it means is that this is a Vmax. So have it as a Vmax, the square, which is equal to initial velocity minus 2g actually a, where a is the height from this position to this position, as I have just symbolized this to be. So in this case, we'll have it as negative 2ga being equal to Vmax square minus u square. So in this case, we're going to have actually a being given as Vmax square minus u square divided by negative should be 2g. So that's the formula you have to use as well, as we already discussed about this one. So which means likewise this formula can also help us to have the initial velocity if we have the height which is given as this height. So can also help us to have the initial velocity in that way as well. So take note of that. So how else we can be able to have, well, actually, how about the time for the whole entire journey, which is the d dot? So how can you be able to have the d dot for the whole entire journey? Should we say the d dot will be obtained the way we discussed about it in for the ground back to ground case? No, because the nature of this free fall motion is not symmetric in nature. So we cannot say actually t dot is equal to 2 times t max. That's a dot line. So take note of that. But before we go for the t dot, let's have to discuss about the displacement of the journey. How should we be able to have the displacement of the journey? Now there's something you have to understand as well. So we discussed that the displacement is the change in positions. Let's say the object has moved from point A in the all way around, let's say, to point B, and let's say it has covered about should be 20 meters, and after some time the object has decided to come back. Let me just have to use it this way. So should be now, it is going like this, and after some time the object has returned back. Should be now this. I should have to use another ink there for you to see properly. Now the object has returned back now to point C, and let's say it covered about 5 meters for that man. So what is the overall distance for the journey? So now the distance will be given as 20 meters plus 5 meters. So we discussed all this in our actually linear kinematics. Just have to go through that run, and for your own goodness, in case you missed that run. And what is the displacement for the whole entire journey? So displacement is given as the final position minus the initial position. Of course, you come across some books presenting the displacement in terms of x. So it is the same. And of course, some books they present it as in terms of s, can be given as delta s is equal to si should be sf minus si. It is the same, but you just have to know in that way. So what is the final position of the object, and what is the initial position for the object? So now initial position is given as xi. This is initial position, which is given as, this is the 0 position. And how about the final position? So the displacement is the difference between the initial position as well as the final position. So now if the whole of this one is 20 meters, Now the object is here at this point, 5 meters away from this point. What is this distance? So now this distance will be given as 15 meters. So which means the final position is given as 15 meters. And the minus initial position, which is 0 meters. So which means the displacement is given as 15 meters. So that is. And also think about this as well. What if you have this case? And that should be now. Now we should have also this other case that will literally demonstrate the concept of displacement. Of course, we discussed all these in the video. We discussed about the actually linear kinematics. Just have to go through the video, you come across actually such kind of information. So now let's think of having the object. Let's say this is a point A. Should be this is the level ground. Let's say this is the level ground. Now we have the object being thrown upwards and that turns back. And assuming that the overall height is given as h. Of course, this we discussed already about in when we are looking about the ground back to ground case, where the object is moving upwards at the same time turns back. So we said this is the initial position given as xi. This is the final position given as xf. You understand that the overall displacement is given as well because the object has been displaced. Actually, the object has been launched from the level ground and back to the level ground as well. Although if you may say this is a position, this is another position, but since the object has been launched from the actually ground level back to the level ground, the displacement for the whole entire journey is given as well. So take note of that. We are using the definition of displacement for you to get what it entails there. So keep that in mind. So now, what if the object has been released? Let's say this is. Now I should have to say it this way. Let's say the whole entire journey. Let's say this is the level ground. The object has been released up. Should be in this case. And let's say the overall distance for the whole entire journey. Actually, the overall height is given as, let's say, 50 meters. Now this is a point A. Let's say this is a point B. So now, assuming that the object has to return back. Let's say it is at this point. Let's say this is a point C. And let's say the object has covered about 30 meters to reach at a point accuracy. So what is the overall distance for the whole entire journey? So you see that we have it as 50 plus 30, which is 80 meters. Now how about the displacement for the journey? So just have to look at this actually the distance from this actual position and this position. So the whole of this one, if this is 50 and from here up to here is given as 30, so which means the displacement is given as 20. So that is, so in that case it means the displacement for the journey is given as this one. Now you get it. Now let's go back to our discussions on that case of the free fall motion. Now, what is the overall displacement for the whole entire journey? What is the overall displacement for the whole entire journey? So now, the displacement, which is given as, let's say, h, will be given as the height of the building, which is given as b. So that will be the displacement. So displacement is the height of the building. So take note of that. That's the displacement. In our basic height, it is given as the negative. So height of the building expressed in terms of the displacement will be given as the negative, because as you can see, it is like this is the final position, that's the level ground, of which final position, which is 0, and minus this position will be given as this as the negative. So displacement for this actual case of the free fall motion is given as the height of the building. So now you get what it means there. So that's how you should have to understand about the displacement. So now, how can we be able to get the total time for the whole entire journey? That is now a t total. Should we say the t total will be given as, now should we say that the t total is given as 2 times t max? The answer no, because this nature of the free fall motion, it is not symmetric in nature. So you cannot say that the time takes for the object to move from here up to this point is the same, actually is the same time moving from here up to this point. No, that's the dot line. So you have to think otherwise. So how should you be able to have the t total? And for this case of the free fall motion. So now we use the displacement, actually a formula. We have AC is equal to UD plus half AD square. Now expressing this in terms of the free fall motion, now half S being the height of the building, much as that's the displacement, so have it as a B is equal to initial, which is this one. So now we'll have it as a U. Now this is t total, d minus half GD total square. So that's the formula you have to use to have the d total for the whole entire journey. And that is to say, if we have the height of the building and our initial velocity, can be able to have the d total using this formula. And you should have to use the quadratic formula to have the d total of that case. And likewise, if we have the t total initial velocity, can be able to have the height of the building using the same formula as well. So take note of that in case in case you think that this is something not necessary, but it is very important to look up to take note of that. In fact, it is a very important concept to understand. So take it right. And how else can be able to have the d total? Of course, before I go for another expression that can help you to have the d total, let me express also how can be able to have the final velocity, which is this one. So now, a final velocity can be calculated using the formula V is equal to AD plus U. Now in terms of the free fall motion, you have it as a V is equal to negative G. Now this T is given as the t total, so have it as a t total plus U. So this can help us to have the t total in that way. And at the same time, if we have the t total, we can be able to have the final velocity using the same formula as well. So that is. And how else? How can we be able to have the final velocity using the other formula as well? So we can use this one. V square is equal to U square plus 2AS. Now which this is the final velocity of interest. So that's the final velocity. That which is equal to the initial velocity minus 2g. Now this is the displacement, will be given as the height of the building. Now that is given as, that should be b. So that's how you have to understand about the final velocity. Likewise, if we have the final velocity initial, can be able to have the height of the building using that formula. Or else if we have the height of the building initial after final velocity, you can be able to have the initial velocity using the same formula as well. So now you get it how you have to analyze actually this case of the free fall motion in terms of the formula analysis. So get it like that. So next we're going to see on how you can be able to tackle up different questions to do with the free fall motion. And I mean all those cases we discussed before. So the next video will be how we can be able to solve different problems to do with the free fall motion. That is in combining with this case we discussed about, that is a way up motion and a way down motion, and also ground back to ground case of the free fall motion. And finally, also look at the way you can have to solve some problems to do with this case of the projectile, actually this case of the free fall motion we recently discussed about. So just have to keep yourself up to rate. You'll be able to come across that one recently. So don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel, and for you to keep updated, and for different lessons that you have to be uploaded and that are good for you. Thank you.